The bottom line of my previous videos is there is no one set definition of normal because each individual's conception of normal varies based on their preconceived understanding of what normal is. I myself, just like the previous commenter on one of my YouTube videos, stated that they always strive to be different, not really normal, because a lot of times if you follow the crowd like a lemming, you'll just go off of the you'll fall off the cliff if the main one falls off the cliff. Not to say we don't all make mistakes, obviously. I prefer to call mistakes life-altering decisions because each decision that you make from moment to moment causes, I guess you'd say, a butterfly effect, and that energy causes a different reaction to take place. And for every action, it has an equal and opposite reaction. Think about Isaac Newton. Sir Isaac Newton was an individual that they considered to be a radical mind. He was considered to be thinking outside of the box of society. Think of those that said, round world, round earth, what are you talking about? No, you're insane. No, 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 no. All of these people that the laws of attraction, the laws of physics, the laws of nature, gravity, and all of these forces, all of the forces that they considered to be something of any type of physics, any type of science. I'm talking theoretical physics as well, which you'd think theoretical physicists will be using our phenomenon to help advance and further their studies like they should be doing. There was an individual on yesterday on 60 Minutes who reconstructed the genomes. He would reconstruct the human genome, and he would take various mutations of the human genome, the ATGC, adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine, the four basic building blocks that make up the double helix strand of DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, that makes up the human genetic structure. And he would take various mutations that would take place in them, and he was able to use his brilliant mind to revolutionize science and revolutionize the way of thinking. But the medical department did not want any part of any of his studies and work because it was curing diseases and curing illnesses. Like myself, I have this Asperger's type of thing, symptoms, which causes a delayed reaction every once in a while with the neurons, and right now they're just firing like crazy, but other times not so much. I have a slow delayed reaction. He was able to take different strands of DNA and rearrange the ATGC, because there are hundreds of millions of those arranged in various ways that make you, that make that mixed with the various chemical reactions that happen in your brain, and how the motor neurons fire and how they interconnect with each other and how quickly they interact with each other and connect with each other and fire off these electromagnetic static impulses, these electrical impulses, these impulses that fire off, these neurons that fire off and cause basic processes in your brain. I'll just narrow it down basically, and cause you to be you. Well, this doctor, he's a radical thinker, and he was a out of the box thinker, not a radical as in a way of like, I'm going to do this and I'm just going to do this to a bunch of people like they do over there overseas and mess like that, or these radicals that rise up negatively. No, that's a completely other type of thing that I was talking about. I'm talking about a revolutionary. I'm talking about a person who thinks outside of the box, outside of the norm. That's why I said, what is it to be normal? Well, that individual, he failed college because they gave him an F and told him that because of all of the sciences and maths that they were making him take, the particular courses they were making him take did not further advance his studies in the direction that he was wanting to go, because his way of understanding did not match the way that the current form of science and math accepted, because there was no practical application at the time for his particular set of studies that he was going about. The way he was going about it was such an unorthodox way that they said, no way, we cannot have you here. They failed him, and he dropped out of college. And he dropped out and moved on, and then started furthering his studies on the human genome and the ATGC and the various strands of the Helix Nebula, which was named after Watson and Crick came up with the name of the Helix Nebula. The Helix Nebula, my rear, the Helix double helix ladder form of DNA. Did I say Helix Nebula the entire video? Yeah, those two firing off. Those are firing in my brain. The two different names and putting them together, and got the wrong thing. But this one geneticist who was on 60 Minutes, you should look this up. He was an out-of-the-box thinker, an unorthodox thinker. And just like Watson and Crick were at the time, who said that the DNA structure is in the shape of a double helix. Well, now that's a widely understood and accepted fact because they proved it using the scientific method. They conducted various methods of studies. They conducted various experiments until their hypothesis was proven as fact. That's the scientific method. And they utilized that method. But the problem is, those particular out-of-the-box, unorthodox thinkers, the ones who think differently, who have these ways. Just years ago, a person was able to heal certain types of cancer, but the medical department didn't want that to be on the scene. They did not want that to be mainstream or well-known, because they said if there's a way to heal cancer, imagine where they're going for that. Imagine the possibilities. That person said, well, the medical department all said, imagine the money we'll lose if we heal all these people. And they said, we make a lot of money off of people, cancer patients, and treatments, which is pathetic and awful. But this is a true story. You can look this stuff up from the past, unless they've removed it, as they so commonly do now. But, man, my brain's just rambling right now. But, back to the topic. Someone a lot of times who is thought of as an unorthodox thinker. Look at Sir Isaac Newton. Look at Galileo Galilei, the inventor of the telescope, who look at Boson Higgs, the guy that discovered the Higgs boson particle, or what they call the God particle, that was supposed to prove the primordial existence before the expansion of this universe and the multiverse and all of this. Before, look at the person who was studying string theory. Look at the person who was. Look at the people who, not just Galileo Galilei, which that's he's one of the most significant ones, but also look at Sir Isaac Newton, another one of the most well-known significant physicists or astrophysicists of his time, who was considered an out-of-the-box thinker, but also spiritual. You can have both go hand in hand. The two can go hand in hand, and he was also spiritual. But look at... You've got Avogadro's number, 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd power. You've got, which is a way of measuring units of mass, basically. They do grams and kilograms and convert all that stuff. It's quite complicated. I don't know all of it. I remembered Avogadro's number. It sounds like avocado. But 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd power, and you multiply anything by that to get the weight and mass. But that person was considered an unorthodox thinker. You look at the Pythagorean theorem that was first hypothesized, and the theory, the mathematical principle was put forward by Pythagoras. And a squared plus b squared equals c squared, find c as the hypotenuse of the right triangle, and you find the sum of any two sides of a right triangle is equal to the square root of the remaining side. Homer Simpson said it wrong, but I said it correctly there. The sum of the square root of any two sides of a right triangle is equal to the square root of the remaining side. And you basically solve for c, and you solve for c squared. Well, the person that thought of that a long time ago was doing those mathematical principles, and some of that math is really difficult. I mean, it would take me a long while to do all that. But you've got the person who wrote out the quadratic formula long ago. All of these people were considered thinkers that, they didn't think in the field of current understanding, so it really wasn't. They said, it's not right, but like, I think the quadratic equation is minus b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac, and then all divided by 2a. They had a song they did in school, minus b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Hey! It was like a cheer they did. That's still, hey, it's stuck in my head over it. But that was the quadratic formula. And outside, inside, first, outside, inside, last, FOIL method they used to do quadratic equations, stuff like that. Multiply the first numbers in the outside, then the inside, then the last, and then you get it or whatever, solve for it. And then they started solving for X and Y that was complicated when you started having to go back and forth. But it was like a whole page of math. It was ridiculous. But I'm not great at the math formulas and solving all of the math things because I would go about things and I'd get the right answer, but they told me it wouldn't work later because they said, "Man, you have an unorthodox way of doing this." They said, "Yours wouldn't work in college. Yours wouldn't work here, that, or the other. Whatever. Yours wouldn't work here, there, or yonder." But I had an unorthodox way of doing it, but I got the right answer, and I couldn't even explain to the teachers how I actually got the answer, but I did do. Sometimes I would just go about things in a very unusual way. And if you look at people, they say that this can't be this way, this can't be that way. Well, that geneticist was on 60 Minutes. And just like I was saying, Pythagoras and Pythagorean theorem. Look at Galileo Galilei and Sir Isaac Newton, and you look at all of those people, just like Higgs boson, or Boson Higgs, I should say, who was discovered that, eventually they discovered the mathematical formula, which Homer Simpson even wrote on The Simpsons, by the way, but that's because an astrophysicist worked for The Simpsons, who works for CERN. But also, they discovered the mathematical equation for the Higgs boson particle, and boom, they proved that years and years later. And it turned out to be true that all of that expansion from that what existed before, and without it, nothing could exist. Basically, that's what they were searching for. But then once you get more answers, more questions arise of how this happened and that happened and so on and so forth. But there's always got to be someone who thinks outside of the box, someone who thinks as a revolutionary before anything can ever move forward, because it takes the revolutionaries to actually make a difference in existence. And that individual who's on 60 Minutes, he's working on many ways that have actually been proven he said immortality. I don't think anyone would really want that, because you just live and they continue making money off of you forever and ever and ever and ever, and they just continue to make, rack you up in the system, and then there'd be an overpopulation unless they started doing a depopulation agenda. Then I think there would be an overpopulation of people in that case if they did that, and there would be too many humans, and then it would get into chaos when there starts to be too much population and not enough food and water and nutrition there's not enough nutritional supplement out there to be able to, not enough nutrition to supplement for the amount of population rise, and I don't think it would work out. But the geneticist claims that he has been able to, look at one of the first well-known botanists who did these, for example, Gregor Mendel. Gregor Mendel was actually a monk or a monastery. Many, many years ago, hundreds of years ago actually, Gregor Mendel was considered the father of modern plant science, or the father of modern genetics, basically. And there was a scientist, German scientist, I think, he was over in Germany, I believe, that actually was the father of modern plant science or plant genetics. I think he was different. But Gregor Mendel was a revolutionary in the way he come up with his Venn diagrams to basically see. There was a Mendel diagram that we had to do in 6th or 7th grade, where you would try to see the variation of genomes and genetics to see exactly what the probability of a plant mixing together would be and how it would turn out. Well, Gregor Mendel was the father of that particular modern science, and everyone thought he was crazy at the time. He was a monk, and everyone thought, even those who around him thought he was crazy. But you could be both spiritual and scientific. There's an Asian individual who comes on 5 Plus around here who talks, he did before, and talked about how God and science and spirituality and science can go hand in hand. There's no discrimination needed. But it always, if you think outside of the box, don't feel bad, because it's always taken a revolutionary and someone who thinks outside of the box to change the game and change the way things are for the better. We don't need the negative ones, but the positive changes can be good. And so do. But that was a Sunny reference. The but the adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine, that individual was able to change. Basically, he can also manipulate the chromosomes. We have 23 chromosomes, and he was able to manipulate those chromosomes before birth, and was able to predetermine whether the child was going to have a particular genetic issue or a mutation in the genomes, because a mutation in the ATGC and the way it's laid out, it could be ADTTTGGC, AGTGTCGC, it could be any sort of way, and one little mutation of a half G, a half an A, whatever, could cause a huge impact on the person's life after they're born, and determine whether or not they have a particular illness, a mental illness, a particular whether they are special needs or whatever, and retardation and Down syndrome. They stated that this individual was able to work with the chromosomes and the double helix strand DNA, that double helix ladder, was able to work with it and restructure. Basically, some of these here, for example, if this is A T T G, well, he could move that A over there and the G here and move it around a little and change the person's structure completely, or even reverse a cancer process, or cause duplicate a cancer cell and cause a realistic duplicate of the cell, and confuse the cancer cell. That was done a while back. They actually created a duplicate, microscopic duplicate, that looked so much like the cancer cell, it confused the cancer cell and caused them to die, and communicated with them with electromagnetic frequencies. They actually communicated with the cancer cells and caused them to die. But they didn't want to put that on the mainstream because they wouldn't make any more money off of treatment and things. And that's really sad. But that particular individual had what someone call a radical mindset. He had a revolutionary mindset. Quit the college that he was going to because he was unorthodox for them and thought differently. But he was very intelligent, and he could really be a game changer for science. Now, I see they're wasting their money. They are doing it to rats and mice for some reason. He said, well, I've now made a rat immortal. Who wants an immortal rat or mouse? But that's their test. That's their testing. That spreads the bubonic plague and Red Death. That spreads the plague around. That the fleas from the mice, they bite the mice, and then through the blood that causes that happened in China still. Because they're getting rid of a lot of the cats, the mice population, the rat population, the rodents start spreading, and they try to get rid of all of the stray cats, and that's what happens. But back to this. That individual is working to restructure and to bring back basically the cells that are alive and mix it with a modern elephant and bring back the woolly mammoth. Now, that's all for show. I mean, feeding something like that and having something prehistoric, living in modern times, our atmospheric conditions are different, the surrounding environment is different, and when you suddenly introduce a foreign object or a foreign animal, person, individual, whatever, that has been extinct for ever how long of a period of time, which time is sort of an abstract concept used to measure a unit of measurement to measure existence from point to point, but not really, because then again, space and time can be one that they can be. They're not really, linear progression of existence from point to point can be measured that way. But I mean, it's not really. It is, but space. It can be. I can picture it, but I can't say what I'm trying to convey. I hope I'm not saying too much for one video, but it takes a free thinker. It takes someone who is an unorthodox thinker to change the game, to change a large group. And just like how one apple can rot the group, the whole bunch, one bad apple can rot the whole bunch, One good apple can change the entire understanding of a large group of people or individuals, and for the better. And you can be spiritual and scientific. I don't know why people think you can't. I had a theory about the time that it takes for the evil or darkness to start reigning again during how he said there's one more chance Jesus rules, and then all of that happens, and then he said there's going to be like a time where the evil gets another chance after a 1,000-year period, whatever, something like that, to reign again. What if that 1,000-year period, if 1,000 years is a day of our time as a day to God, that would equate to about several hundred, like a million years, 365 million years, which would be enough time for that corrupt DNA or corrupt genetics to actually reform again, and that will be around us, and then around the perfect people that were chosen, or whatever, the perfect genetic people that were chosen, and then the corrupt versions start rising again, and then he has to end that once and for all, so that never happens again, the cycle doesn't repeat, something like that. That's just my idea. Maybe that is the way it goes. Who knows? But it takes someone in the someone like that individual. He has cures for cancers, illnesses, viruses, and all of these viruses stored in labs everywhere, frozen, and he has been able to, and proven to be able to stop these negative genetic mutations and viruses. But yet they wouldn't let him on the scene because they continue to make money from the misfortunes of the population. Anyway, back to the original topic. It takes a mind, like an unorthodox thinker. It takes someone who thinks outside of the box to be a game changer. So what is normal? Normal is different for everyone, and varies from person to person. But sometimes it pays to not be a lemming and follow the crowd, and just be yourself and think outside of the box. Just be an unorthodox thinker. Gregor Mendel, he was a monk, but yet he became both spiritual, I guess, and a scientist. And I believe he was both, and he was the father of modern genetics. Watson and Crick, everyone's like, "Oh, you're crazy on the structure of DNA." Nope, they were correct, proven by their microscope. Higgs boson, Higgs. I mean, the Higgs boson particle. They thought no, and then all of a sudden, they've tried to prove it for years. They were pretty sure it existed, and then they found it, that the basic components that allow the universe to exist. But then you dig deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and then there's more questions arise. But still, I know that it derived from God. I know God exists, and without spirituality and God, we're empty. But look into a lot of Russell Brand's talk, and you'll know there's the micro quantum world, the macro quantum world. The micro quantum world is where people seem to have a little bit of trouble. They just don't, because they can't see it. They don't think it exists, but yet they believe in genetics and they believe in DNA wholeheartedly. They believe in, they'll talk about evolution and stuff, but yet that's based on a bunch of scientific studies that they claim they have data and information to back it up, but you haven't really seen that data, have you? Just like they said on Sunday, you haven't seen it, but yet you believe it exists, so you're going out of pure, dare I say, faith to believe it, right? Just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I mean, you can not believe in the sun all day because you don't look in the sky, but when you go outside, does that mean you're not going to get sunburned? No, it does not. If you don't put on suntan lotion, so it's good to be prepared and feel and know that it's good to prepare ahead of time it's just good to know. And you can be scientific and spiritual. I don't know how people think that you can't be both. And that scientist, that individual on TV, was able to change. He could be a game changer and change the face of science and genetics as we know it. But they didn't really want to let him, and they didn't even let that segment finish, just like they didn't let Adam Sandler's segment finish because of time for the football game. But they just didn't. They don't want things like that because he's a free thinker and a very intelligent individual. And bottom line, Sometimes unorthodox thinking outside of the box, is good. Be a free thinker. I'm sure Isaac Newton was considered crazy. Galileo Galilei was considered crazy. Plato, Pythagoras, Gregor Mendel. This is the person I was talking about, George Church. Kind of an interesting name. George Church's goal is to protect humans from viruses and genetic diseases, as well as aging. And aging as well. So on 60 Minutes yesterday, they talked about the complicated ethics of genetic engineering. Now, you've got ethics involved there, obviously, because people feel like, don't mess with God's plan or don't mess with God's creation. But what they were doing was they said they were proving biological existence because they recreated what they call primordial soup. They were recreating the substance that existed that allowed, they believe anyway, that allowed human life to, what they quoted, evolved, quote unquote. But I don't necessarily believe that their version of evolution is 100%. See, like I was stating earlier, people believe that out of pure faith and believe there's a whole library of data and scientific data to back it up, but they've never actually gone and actually looked at it and looked at the extensive studies into the studies that they've actually done to prove it. But yet the same thing goes for us. I mean, there's all kinds of information in the Middle East from biblical texts. There's all kinds of things that people go over there to look at it. Not always, but when you start looking into the historical documents and they line up with biblical texts, you see that, hey, this did happen. And that's what I don't get, why people don't see that. They just choose to be ignorant and ignore it. And I'm not trying to use ignorant as an offensive term, as they would do. I'm just saying the ignorance is bliss, isn't it? Just to live and just not even pay any attention to anything, and just like the ME, for example, that phenomenon, just ignore it. It doesn't exist, right? No, you can't do that. That doesn't work. I'm going to walk outside, I'm going to ignore the sinkhole in front of me, and then I'm going to fall into it. Does that make any sense? No. But you've got to pay attention, and I mean, the scientific facts are there to back up biblical texts as well. Some things seem far-fetched, but they even looked at when time was warped, and they even sent out quantum D-wave and laser energy they sent out. They claimed they sent a laser beam out into the universe and found out that there was time missing, which matched up with the book of Job, and you can look that up as well, the missing time and the scientific evidence behind it. It's fascinating. Well, this scientist here, yes, he's doing genetic engineering, and sometimes that goes into a slippery slope of ethics, of whether it's right and wrong, like I was talking about in the beginning. Back to that, right and wrong varies from person to person. The definition of normal varies from person to person based on their understanding. But interesting how his name is Church, but when you start trying to, they're saying when you start playing God, basically, it becomes an ethics issue, and it does. But when you're trying to help and heal people, that's one thing. Immortality, or it's and reversing aging. You can reverse aging by, there's the half-life in the cells, and there's a particular chemical that causes aging. There are actually some plants and animals out there that are biologically immortal because their genetics allow them to be that way. But that's natural. And there's a genetic process that takes place within all of our cells and our skin that dies, that the aging process, it causes us to, it just slowly deteriorates and we start dying the moment we're born, really. And they're looking into how to reverse that. Now, that whole immortality thing, that right there does get into ethics, and I don't really agree with that. I feel like life is what it is. You can't, I don't know. I don't want to get into that. And then they talk about transhumanism and uploading human consciousness into devices and things like that, but it's not really you any longer, because then you're controlled by a large AI system that's interconnected worldwide, network of networks known as the internet, and you put yourself into what is known as the cloud, and then your brain is just kind of it's a genetic copy of your brain, made of zeros and ones that's just floating around, just kind of going from server to server. So basically you think you're immortal, but really, is it really you any longer? The real you probably just dies when they kill you. You just die, and then you're copy moves over to something and then people think it's you, but it's not. Unless you are alive at the same time and somehow extend your consciousness into a device, kind of like a virtual reality or augmented reality situation. But that right there, we're already going through altered reality as it is, aren't we? And the whole, what they talk about, the matrix and the quantum shifting thing. But that is a whole other scenario. That to me is unethical, and when you get into all that, it becomes unethical. But we, as far as the immortality thing, that becomes unethical. But also, it does say in prophecy that men shall seek death and it shall not find them. Men shall seek death and not find it. Men's hearts will fail them from fear and all kinds of things like that. So it's a slippery slope, like I stated. But to cure viruses and cancers and things like that, that's a good thing. That is a good thing. But they didn't want him to do that because they weren't making money off. They're making money off of all of that. And if they cure them, then they'll have nothing to make money off of. The medical system will go broke. That's the thing and that's awful. That is just like the way they view things is awful. That's just really, really pathetic. And it's just really sad the way they view things, how in such a selfish way. But they claim to have proven the evolutionary process of something. Well, something had to make that happen, now didn't it? Something had to make it happen. That something would be the source, the I am, God, the higher consciousness, the consciousness source, the source itself, God, the Lord. There you go. It had to happen. Because guess what's happening now? Why is that? Even if beings did that, caused it to happen, it would be done through, hey, now I'm going to make man in my image, it says. Then it says, now let us make man in our image. After it says God decided to make man in his image. Now who's us? An hour later. Well, it could be the beings, the higher conscious beings that then did the Lord's work. Just like if we were working through a device somewhere else through technology and we were doing something through a robotic device, it's still us that's doing it. Well, just like if God utilized something else and his consciousness is connected to it, it's still him doing it. He's working through those beings. Well, just like he works through the angels and things like that. But here's the thing. It's the ethical part of playing God. That's the negative part. But also you have the good parts of curing viruses and genetic diseases and issues like that. And he says he can cure those and prevent them completely. Well, when people say that we didn't have a source, how's that happening? They said they recreated the existence at the beginning of the Big Bang. Well, boom, what happened? They recreated it. So thus it had to have been created to be recreated, I mean, something had to have pushed it along, something had to have made it happen, and just like they stated, they're recreating the beginning stages of life and how they believe we got started. Well, they recreated it and reproved how it happened, but obviously they recreated it, so obviously something had to have created to begin with. Thus, God. But anyway, moving back to this, it's a good thing and a bad thing, and it's a slippery slope, like I stated. It's kind of like you can go down into it spirals down into a lot of complication because then you've got the ethics of it, then you've got the ethics committee that goes into it, you've got all kinds of oversight and things, and people say, oh, this is wrong, that's wrong, this is right, but this is wrong. You've got all kinds of confusion, and the medical system doesn't want something like that out there because it would take away their business, which is very sad, really, because they should be able to cure viruses and genetic diseases without any type of complication or problem, and you shouldn't have to, now given in the wrong hands, they could cause and recreate them and cause major issues, but they even have viruses stored up in Russia, and both Russia and Alabama, and even in Antarctica they have food supplies and the world's illnesses and viruses stored in those areas, just frozen, just waiting. But look up that individual. It takes a revolutionary. It takes an unorthodox thinker. It takes someone who thinks outside of the box. Out of the Box. That's an old show. Never really was a fan of that show, but it takes someone who thinks outside of the norm. So, are you a normie, or are you a normie, as they call it, a normal? Are you normal? Are you different? Do you think outside of the box? Well, alright, that's all for this video, I suppose. But just like those individuals, many of them were spiritual and scientific. You can be both. think for yourself and be a revolutionary for a positive change. That's all I have to say for this video. And just, you never know the possibilities. You just never know. Infinite realities out there. Go find yours, make your reality. And I'm hoping things get better for me, myself as well. Things could be better. But right now my mind is just thinking nonstop. But I know things could be better. But hey, let's try and make this reality better while we're here, while we're in it. This body, this existence. Let's make this life better while we are living it. It takes a revolutionary thinker to change the very understanding of an entire large group. And you can be both spiritual and scientific at the same time. History has proven this. Look at Galileo, look at Sir Isaac Newton, look at all of these individuals that I mentioned. Newton, Galileo, Pythagoras, Plato, Watson and Crick, Voss and Higgs. Russell Brand even is a modern spiritual and scientific individual. And he's also a little bit of a motivational speaker. He speaks about all kinds of things and talks about the unusual things in existence, but also he's spiritual and he is scientific at the same time. He talks about the whole quantum aspect of things and the quantum existence, the whole micro quantum and macro quantum world. The macro quantum world being what you can see, micro quantum world being what you can't see. That's where it becomes more complicated because people don't think they exist because they can't see it, but then yet they blindly follow scientific things every day, but yet they ignore the spiritual aspect because they think they can't see it. But that is what governs and so that there is a existence that is governing forces in which we cannot understand. Just like he stated, he said that things are governed by forces which we can't understand, we cannot see sometimes beyond that, like the bees, like the birds, like the animals, like the like nature, like the bugs, like the butterflies and their internal tracking system. Whales and dolphins, they have this internal tracking system. Our signals are messing with that, the natural GPS frequencies. Humans used to have that, and a circadian rhythm as well. They discovered we used to have a natural compass in our mind. Our conscious mind had a natural compass in our brain years ago, but we lost it after we started depending on technology and depending on other means and making compasses and things like that. And we started depending on maps and GPS now and technology, and we've now lost that natural GPS that we had and the circadian rhythm that we used to have as well. But all those scientists that I mentioned, including like Gregor Mendel, he was a monk that was also a scientist, and that was like off the charts then. That was like, no, you just can't be both. But then he was, and he was the father of modern genetics. And that's what they call him anyway, because of his revolutionizing of genetics. You can be spiritual and scientific. Think outside of the box, think for yourself, be a revolutionary for a positive change. I will talk to you all very soon. Let me know what you think. Leave your comments in the comment section below. Hopefully I continue to feel better. I have my ups and downs. We all do. So anyway, if you'd like to help show support, please feel free to do so. Maybe I'll do a live stream sometime soon. I hope I will. Signing out. My links are below. The PayPal link's below if you'd like to show your support. My email's below if you'd like to talk that way. And there's nothing else to say. My channel's right here. And you can hit the notification bell. Just don't hit it too hard. Don't break your screen. Don't break the device. Anyway, hit the like button as well. And like, subscribe, share, comment. I love you all. Signing out. Share with others.